Welcome to Secrets for an Inspirational Life with Mimi Novic, the place where every heart tells its story. Whether it's inspiration, courage or hope you need, you've come to the right place. Sit back and enjoy the journey with us. Subscribe below to be sure you don't miss future episodes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. How are you all today? I hope that you are well. I hope that life is bringing you some beautiful moments, some peaceful moments, and moments where you can look after yourselves. And that's something I think that we all forget, is how important it is that we give ourselves the time, the space, and the honor to actually respect what our heart, our bodies, our souls need in these times, because these are quite difficult times. And, it can happen at any time. Change drastically can happen in the world. So it's important that we keep ourselves grounded and also we keep our hearts open. And we can only do that really if we respect ourselves as people and respect those around us, because every one of us is going through something that nobody else knows about. So it's important that we all lend a hand really and an ear. I found that in my life. We never really know when we meet somebody, what is their story? So let's be kind. I think the world needs a lot more kindness. Now, I am absolutely delighted to welcome my special guest today, who is Ada Ibezi. Ada is an award-winning international speaker, domestic abuse advocate, consultant, and trainer. She is the founder and CEO of Against Domestic Abuse in the UK and the Ada Ibezi Foundation in Nigeria. These two organisations are committed to breaking the silence around domestic abuse and supporting women and children to heal and thrive. Ada works closely with the Metropolitan Police Service, where she currently serves as chair of the Violence Against Women and Girls Independent Advisory Group. She's also a key figure in the Met's Community Centred Learning Programme, regularly training police officers on the importance of survivor-centred support. Through her efforts, she's helping shift conversations, challenge silence, and build bridges of trust between survivors and frontline services. With a rich background in education and a deep passion for holistic well-being, Ada brings a unique and powerful combination of insight, empathy, and leadership. Her mission is clear: to help others not just to survive, but to truly thrive. Today, she shares her rather incredible journey with us. Welcome, dear Ada.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for having me, Mimi. It's so exciting. I'm excited to be here. So thank you
Oh,
for having
well, thank
me.
you. I'm very honored, and I actually was excited to have you on and to speak to you. And I'm going to also roll out the red carpet for you because you are an absolutely astounding lady.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm
Oh,
encouraged by your words.
oh, and please, you know, I would like everyone to know out there that this lady does some absolutely incredible things, and her story truly is something that is awe-inspiring. So and I speak for my audience as well, I'm very grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for the great opportunity.
Oh, now, Ada,
Yes.
as I said, you have, and you still do, lead a rather amazing life, considering what sort of life path, I suppose, you've travelled upon. Let's put it that way. Yes, let's put it delicately and let's put it that way.
Mhm.
Um, but I would like you to talk about it. And
Mhm.
of course, we will discuss many things today. But let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
You do all these things, but
Right.
how did all of that start?
Okay. So you've just read out a bio that, and it's amazing when I hear it, how my life really has come to this point. So I, my life, I grew up in a very loving home, a small nuclear family, and it was full of love. But just to say, in as much as it was a small one, just myself and my brother, whom I absolutely love, I had very loving parents. And born in the United Kingdom, I'm fully Nigerian because that's where my heritage is. And so I grew up in a loving home. I was raised in a Christian family. And although I was born here, I spent some time in the United Kingdom. I spent some time in Nigeria, 13 years of my life. I came back and really just finding my feet. But being raised in church, I am a very sociable person, so I love meeting people. And just to say, um, my life really, that what led me to this point was my lived experience of domestic abuse. So on the 11th of March in 2022, my children and I ended up in front of a refuge. Thankfully, it was a trauma-informed refuge. But what got us there was because we had fled domestic abuse. My family and I had the opportunity to move to West Africa. We moved to a country called Togo because of an opportunity that came. I had the privilege of my background is teaching, so primary school teacher, trained and worked in across 3 continents, and I was privileged really to go back. And for me, I was going to give back to my continent in the area of education. Um, when we landed, it was amazing. Beautiful beaches, sunny weather, fresh fruits, really everything I'd looked forward to be able to do back in my continent, Africa. And well, the thing is, the dream came crumbling because it wasn't it took a turn that I never really expected. I was physically assaulted by my husband at the time in front of our 2 children. And it didn't start from there. In fact, there's an element of domestic abuse that people um, don't know much about, which is the emotional, the psychological abuse, the hidden sides of domestic abuse, where the person doesn't have to lay a hand on you. And that's coercive control and controlling behavior, which starts to eat away at your self esteem, your self confidence, your being, really. And so I got to the point where I didn't know who I was going to meet. Was it Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde? I was walking on eggshells. On the day I was assaulted in front of my children, that was a traumatic event for myself, for my girls. And ultimately, we left our home the next day, myself and the girls, doing our normal thing, going to school. But then that was the last time I saw my marital home because we left with just the clothes on our backs. And so, just to say that we that I was left, even though I'd gone back to just somebody kindly opened up their home to keep us for a few days. And then we eventually were able to get a more permanent accommodation, which we stayed in for 2 months. And then I got a call one day that really I had learned to listen to my gut. And I knew that I had to get out of there. Otherwise, my life was going to really just take a different turn. And so we had to go across 2 borders. We boarded a hired car, had a hired driver who drove us across 2 borders. We got to Lagos, Nigeria, stayed with family for 2 nights. Nobody knew what was going on, and boarded a flight, ended up in London, UK. And that's where days later I ended up in a refuge, having made so many calls, staying with a relative and making calls online just to get somewhere to go that was safe. And so that's where my journey about domestic abuse started. I really had the really a calling, I'd say, that I had to speak up, because I realized, even as myself, somebody who's educated, I was completely ignorant about domestic abuse, having met in church, married in church. This really took me by surprise. I never expected this. And also, the irony is, I was a pastor's wife. And so that's, the safest place really wasn't safe. And so that's that. My journey began from there. I felt the calling to be a voice for the voiceless survivors of domestic abuse, and so that's how I've ended up on your show today, your podcast. It's something that I just feel deep inside of me that we need to speak about, because we don't speak about it enough, and so many people are trapped in relationships that are abusive, but don't have the language because they don't understand coercive control, and they don't understand the invisible facets of domestic abuse. So that's my journey.
What a story. I mean, I as you were talking about it, Ada, I had sort of in my stomach, I had butterflies, and they were butterflies of actually living that moment of you escaping. And it reminds me of a story and a film that I watched. Maybe you're familiar with it, Not Without My Daughter.
Okay.
It was many years ago. I watched it when I was young, but it was about going through different countries and
Mhm,
escaping,
mhm.
and what an example of absolute strength that you showed. And
Yes.
this is such a difficult subject, and one that I have to say, for everybody out there who has been touched by this particular subject, we don't even realize sometimes, I think, in our life by what we are going through. We don't
Yes.
realize, do we, that actually certain things that are expected of us, certain things that we tolerate, actually are absolutely unacceptable. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's why your role in all of this, Ada, is so important
Mhm,
to educate people. Because I think once we educate ourselves in things, then we are no longer prisoner to them.
mhm. Yes.
You know, one might say ignorance is bliss, but not in these
Mhm,
circumstances. This is
mhm.
something that is a life or death
Absolutely.
circumstance for many people out there. And
Mhm,
um, your story is something that, although I had these butterflies, and they were butterflies of nerves, because
mhm,
I'm thinking how this lady with two children across the world, ends up, comes back to the UK, comes back home, and
mhm,
what um so many things go through your mind. But
mhm,
one of the important things, I think, which I would like you to talk about as well,
mhm,
please, Ada,
mhm.
is that there are so many forms of abuse, aren't there?
Absolutely.
um and I'm going to leave it to you
Mhm,
to I will come in, of course, but I want people to know about these things and to save themselves,
mhm, mhm,
I suppose,
mhm.
and to know that there are things that are absolutely not okay.
Yes.
I'll leave that to you now, Ada.
Thank you. Um, when it comes to domestic abuse, I absolutely agree with you. Ignorance is not bliss, and domestic abuse is a life and death situation. I'm going to refer I'm going to give a definition of domestic abuse, which comes from the Domestic Abuse Act in the UK of 2021. And it says domestic abuse is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, or threatening behavior violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members. And this is regardless of gender or sexuality. So when I say that domestic abuse is an umbrella term, and domestic abuse, at the core of domestic abuse, is really power and control, the facets, so that's undergirding domestic abuse. But there are various types, various different types of things under that umbrella. So you've got psychological abuse, you've got sexual abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, social abuse, where isolation is key. Is one of the areas that domestic abuse perpetrators, they excel in that. You get isolated from your family, from your friends. And then we have technologically facilitated abuse, digital abuse, where you have things like your phone is tagged, and they're able to know your location so they can find you if you don't turn them off, or using things like CCTV to monitor you, or put in those air tags or whatever it's called in your bag or your car, so then they're monitoring your movements. And then there's emotional abuse, but also one that's not there, that's not in that definition, unlisted, is spiritual abuse. And I say spiritual abuse because there are people who weaponize their holy books or laws to be able to perpetrate abuse and do it well. So, say, for instance, being a Christian, you have people throw about, but God hates divorce. So people are stuck in marriages because they've heard this part that says God hates divorce, but then nobody talks about the part that says, and he also hates the cloak of violence, whatever form that takes, be it physical, emotional, psychological, sexual. God hates that. So, and your life is more important than the law. Your life is very important, it's sacrosanct, in fact. And so the same God that hates divorce hates the violence that's being perpetrated. And so sometimes people use their holy books, or you've got that, or, God said forgive 70 times, 7 times. So therefore, you feeling, the victim or survivor feeling that they have to abide by that, the abuser keeps perpetrating and the person keeps forgiving. The dangerous thing about that is they could then end up losing their lives, because perpetrators then turn to physical violence when they feel they're losing control. And in that's where we have a high number of femicides. It's growing, but really it's important that if you're in a situation right now, that you can reach out to different organizations to be able to make a call, and there'll be somebody on the end of the line to be able to guide you. It's important that we educate ourselves, those that haven't been through it. In fact, I was in a situation, my job, I was teaching safeguarding, and I had no clue. I was listing out domestic abuse as one of the things teachers and had to look out for, but I didn't recognize it because it wasn't in my circumstance, my situation. It wasn't physical, so and so I didn't realize I was in a coercively controlled marriage. For the most part, and so it's important that we do educate ourselves. Not only did I go through that experience, but as an educator and a learner, I decided I was going to go and find out a lot more about domestic abuse and really what it meant, and that enables me to be able to speak to people not just through my lived experience, but what I've learned on this journey.
Now, there are many facets to this. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I was younger, we had lots of people talk about it, but very much sort of, quietly in the shadows, and you weren't really allowed to say it openly, but people spoke about it. And I know at school, it was sort of the hidden sort of thing that wasn't said. And I know some of my friends went through it, but I didn't even realize until they'd got older to the extent of what was happening. And it sort of breaks my heart to think that there we are as children, not knowing what
Mhm.
our friends are going through, and
Mhm.
then as adults. And that's why I want to bring this up, in that
Mhm.
children that go through this, firstly, because I know you're an ambassador for the same charity that I am, Kids
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah.
um, it's important to, very much in the early stages of life,
Mhm.
deal with these things also,
Yes.
because we then otherwise have a whole big problem of
Mhm.
adults that become damaged through this
Mhm. Mhm.
and carry this, I suppose, huge scar and scars through their life,
Mhm.
not knowing. Maybe this is what's important, I think, is to recognize that there are different forms of abuse that go on.
Mhm.
And maybe what we don't think, such as coercive control, which is a new thing really, in sort of everyone knowing about it, but it's
Mhm.
been going on, for years and years.
Absolutely.
And, just because my partner says to me, you're stupid, or calls me names, that's not really abuse, because they're not hitting me.
Mhm.
But that in itself is abuse. And
Mhm.
the more you tolerate it, the more you get used to it, the more you don't see anything wrong with it,
Mhm.
to the point that it's detrimental to your life and to your health.
Mhm.
So, how do we get people to admit? Because to admit something like this is, in fact, opening a very big Pandora's box.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because if I say to you, well, actually, when I was young, I'm going to make it very, very sort of unserious, so
Mhm.
to speak, so for
Mhm.
people to understand out there. You know, my neighbor actually threatened to kill us with a knife. Actually, that is a true story. We had a
Mhm.
neighbor who
Mhm.
did threaten to kill the children in the village with a knife.
Okay.
Um, so that's actually a true story.
Yeah.
And there you go. I've brought it up because clearly I've not got over that.
Yes.
So where do we go from there? How,
Mhm.
uh, admitting that,
Mhm.
um, yes, it was horrible at the time, and I was afraid. But what about actually for people out there who did have a knife at their throat, for
Mhm.
example, or it
Mhm.
might not have been a knife, they were beaten, or
Mhm.
they had other forms of verbal abuse.
Mhm.
Once you actually admit that to yourself and say, actually, I've had 15 relationships, none of them have worked. I'm putting it all into the pot now, because there's
Yeah.
all sorts of, throughout my work that I do with people, I hear this all the time. Well, I can't maintain a relationship because, I don't know, 20 years ago this and this happened and I
Mhm.
was abused in this way. And you think, because professionally speaking, like yourself, Ada,
Mhm.
it's because, well, there was a lot of events that happened,
Yes.
and that's where it's led you to this point. But for
Mhm.
you to actually say, I have a problem, you open that box, and
Yeah.
then what do you do with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you go with that? Because you are in a frightful situation at that point. You're on the line between sanity and insanity. Do
Mhm.
you carry on living in ignorance?
Mhm.
Or if you're in a violent situation, what do you do? Are you scared to run? Are you scared to flee? Not
Yeah.
everyone has the courage like you
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
They don't want to feel stupid. Well, I know somebody that says, well, a friend of mine, well, my girlfriend just sort of was shouting at me every day, but it's okay
Mm.
because, she made me dinner.
Right.
So how do you get your head around all of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Where do you begin for people out there who can actually relate to what you're saying?
Mhm.
Where do you begin? Because somewhere we have to offer the help
Mhm.
and the guidance, I suppose, in where people can turn to.
Mhm. I'm glad you talked about this. So I do some training on children and domestic abuse and the impact. And so to think, so with trauma is the imprint that's left within a child's psyche and nervous system. So not the actual event that might have happened. So not necessarily what they witnessed, but the impact, the imprint that is left on them. And let's say, as we're talking about domestic abuse is one of those experiences. So adverse childhood experiences. And it's important that we actually do talk to people who are caregivers, who are in a position where they have children, in like schools and universities, colleges, to be able to speak to them. And hopefully they're open to being able to learn so that they can cater for these children and intervene early. Because domestic abuse without intervention can have a lifelong impact. And you have adverse childhood experiences, like you've mentioned, that you talked about the impact on people that you've spoken to. So you have things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, and this is for children aged between 0 to 17, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect. Maybe there's substance abuse in the home, there's divorce or mental illness, there's an incarcerated relative, or they've seen their mother being treated violently, or domestic abuse going in their home. And these are things that leave their imprint on children. And to be able for people to move on, so we have to understand that children can only model what they see. So we can tell them as much as we like. The sad thing is that children are still viewed as they are still, in my view, forgotten victims of domestic abuse, though they are now legally recognized as victims, no longer mere witnesses. So when you're talking about people growing up having gone through that, we have this thing where in different cultures where you don't air your dirty linen. We don't talk about emotional things because, say, for instance, you've mentioned your friend. Oh well, she treats me badly, but she cooks me food, and that's how perpetrators of abuse keep getting away with that. Because of course, when you meet them, they don't show themselves as they truly are. It's like they're playing double game. So what they are on the outside is not what they are on the inside. So for people to, perpetrate abuse, oh yes, he did that to me, but he's kind. He pays for the bills in the house, and I'm right now, I do understand that both men and women do go through domestic abuse. But as speaking from a female perspective, being a female survivor myself, I will for this show be able to be talking about men as perpetrators and women as survivors of domestic abuse, just so that I don't get them mixed up. But it's important that we are able to really call it what it is and be brave enough to call it what it is. So it took someone for me, I was relaying a story and she looked at me and she said, "But that's emotional abuse." Now that smacked me right in the face because I'd never heard that term before. I'm educated, but I didn't know that. I was, doing safeguarding training for staff at school, but I still didn't know what that was. And so for myself, it took me to go away and really investigate, what is this that this person has said? I went on Google and checked out what that was, and I was flabbergasted because everything on there I ticked. So I think somewhere to start is actually, okay, what is this that's going on? Trying your best to find out what's this terminology. Go on, there are different tools online where you can just find out what is domestic abuse. Just go through a checklist and see if that matches your situation. But it's important really that we're able to shatter that silence, which enables perpetrators to keep perpetrating, to keep moving from victim to victim, because we are silent. But then, of course, you have to do that with care. You don't challenge them because you could ultimately lose your life. So it's just about doing the work in the background and just trying to find out and link with an organization that's able to point you in the direction that you need. If it is that they need to put together a safety plan for you. But I think communication is key. It took somebody saying to me, you have to speak to your family. And to say that my family, as I mentioned, is a loving family. And for the first time in my life, I plucked up the courage and I spoke to my brother and I enlightened him. I told him what was going on, but it took me to break that silence, and it took me to speak to somebody outside of that toxic environment to then help me. Unfortunately, I have to say though, with my culture, and I'm not sure if it's with everyone, some people think it's something of honor. You're messing up the family name. People end up being sent back to their families, even though they're going through just horrific domestic abuse. But because they're trying to keep their image, they're trying to keep their family name. For them, it's a disgrace that you're going to leave. There's no way. So they'd rather you go back to that abusive relationship. Unfortunately, some women go back to those relationships, and their lives are taken away from them. So it's important, really, that as a society, we are open to hearing about domestic abuse, being able to educate ourselves so that we can support those who are going through it, who might not even know the language, they don't know the name, knowing that you might get pushback, but at least if you know and you're able to support, that's a great way to start. But looking inwardly and just checking with yourself, and knowing that it's okay to speak up, it's okay to do the research, and just knowing what your situation is, being very mindful about how you go about doing that.
And what about, I know you're talking about it from a lady's point of view,
Uh-huh.
and but there are many men, aren't there?
Absolutely.
Because I
Absolutely.
want to put this out there also, because I know a couple of such incidences that I've, come professionally in contact with, but also I know, people that are actually going through it now, and
Yes.
they are male, and
Yes.
that is a completely different
Yeah.
shame for them, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely, absolutely. So just to say that statistics show that 751,000 men experience domestic abuse every year. And those are men that have been able to speak up about the situation they're in. And I would, for men, I see even the added thing about how do you, the shame that people heap on it. So you're not a man if you speak up. How could you be abused by a woman, and so on and so forth? So they end up not saying anything, and they are impacted the same way that females are impacted. And again, it's about speaking up, calling out those behaviors that aren't right, because some people, some men are trying their best to lead their homes, to do the right thing, but they also go through domestic abuse, and it's horrific. I would not wish it on anybody. Domestic abuse is it's this scourge of the earth, really. It debilitates lives. It takes lives, and some people end up in having difficulties, ending up in mental institution, just because where do you go? Sadly, some people take
Mm.
their lives, and lifelong impact of domestic abuse for children when there's no intervention. So it affects them. They feel anxious, inconsistent regulation of emotions. It's a lifelong impact without, as I said earlier, without early intervention. Struggle to trust people. It really it sucks the life out of you. It sucks your being. You cannot, in an abusive relationship, in domestic abuse, you cannot thrive. Like, you cannot, because
Mm.
everything about you has been questioned. You even doubt yourself. Even the decisions that you're making, you don't trust, because you've had this negative input for so long. You're in a toxic environment that you cannot. It's the same as planting a flower and not giving it the things it needs to be able to thrive, and expecting that flower to thrive. It won't.
It's correct. It actually poisons everything in your
Everything.
life and distorts your life and the
Mhm.
way that you look at yourself and the way that you look at life. I was speaking to someone the other day, and I said to them, they were telling me about cooking, and it was just a normal conversation. And they said to me, well, I don't really cook anymore. I said, why not? You're such a good cook. And they said to me, well, because my husband criticizes my cooking, and he's criticized it for so many years that I actually have given up. And
Mhm.
I heard that very deeply, because I thought, you see, n- no one was touched, no one was beaten,
Mhm.
no one was abused in the physical sense.
Mhm.
But I really want people to understand this, Ada. It's not just one facet, it's
No,
many facets. And
absolutely.
that's what's important. He had verbally abused her for so long, saying that her cooking, and I'm just, this is just a small thing, but a
Mhm.
small thing, as we know, can lead to bigger and bigger things. Um,
Mhm.
what happens? You stop
Mhm.
living, you just
Yeah.
start to exist. And
Yeah.
things, for example, well, like the friend, well, she shouted at me every day, but she cooks me dinner. And if I say to him, but that actually is not okay,
Yeah.
I will be seen as the person who is in the wrong,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
people become very protective over these perpetrators.
Yes. Um, I
Why
can
is that?
actually, I, they say tiny drops of water make a mighty ocean, right?
Mm,
So your confidence is being knocked, your self-esteem being chipped away every single day. I can absolutely relate to your friend who stopped cooking because I had to, because it was never good enough. And I was somebody that used to cook for fellowships, have friends around, didn't have any problems with cooking until it
mm,
got knocked. I might make a mistake. I'm trying my best to rectify, and it's just, the actually you just it just kept eating away at my self-confidence, that I just felt like I was walking dead, like a tree that inside is hollow, and so when a big wind
mm,
comes, it topples over, because it's such an insidious thing. They just keep eating away at you, just keep chipping away at your person, that you lose yourself, you just become something else, just to be able to, get by. And so it's important, and you clearly mentioned about you being, then you become the person who's they still, okay, I stop being your friend because they're protecting the perpetrator. I had a friend of mine banned from coming to our house because an incident, something happened openly, and I didn't even realize. I was just there, I was sitting there, but I didn't see it because I'd probably heard it for so often that it just didn't register. It was normal to me. But she challenged that. Lo and behold, she was banned from coming to my house by my perpetrator, because that's a voice he wanted to make sure was as far away from me as possible, that would actually make me question anything. So I'm glad that I'm still friends with that person up till today. But I have to say, they sow doubts, seeds of doubt in your mind, that you then slowly, that's how you start losing friends, because after a while you're coming up with all these excuses. And it's domestic abuse, coercive control is so insidious. I'd compare it to carbon monoxide. If you're sitting in a room with carbon monoxide, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, but that same carbon monoxide could you could get very sick from that, or you could die from carbon monoxide. But that's how insidious domestic abuse is. And it just keeps, you know, eating away at you, eating away at you. You're not even aware. You're such a different person. You bump into somebody and you're just different. You're not you anymore. So that's how bad, it's terrible, domestic abuse, and it's something, unfortunately, we're living with. 1 in 3 women affected by domestic abuse, one in 6, 7 men affected by domestic abuse, and 1 in 5 children. It's an epidemic, and so we do need to learn about it, and keep our eyes peeled.
That's so true, because
Mhm.
also there's an epidemic out there, Ada,
Mhm. Mhm.
of mental health issues,
Absolutely.
of anxiety,
Mhm.
and people are trying to treat all these issues. But I think you can't be successful in the
Mhm.
treatment of these issues unless you get to the root cause of
Root.
it.
Absolutely.
So there's no point in you, I don't know, reading 100 books
Mhm.
or watching 1,000 videos if you're
Mhm.
not actually dealing with the root cause. And
Cool.
as you said, there's so much of this, and I think there's so much of this, much more um, in the Western world for sure, um, since the world has turned upside down.
Mhm.
Because now, as you said, culturally, some people feel that they have to tolerate
Mhm.
certain situations. I don't think it's everywhere, but
Mhm.
yes, of course, we have to sort of recognize that it is in some cultures. But
Mhm.
the thing is now, it's not actually just particular cultures. It's globally.
Yes.
There's an
Yeah.
issue of people not respecting each other, of people hating each other, of nobody really knows what's going on in the world. We are in a constant stress mode.
Mhm.
And I think this adds to it. And they said that when, in these past few years, where the world has gone a bit crazy, to say the least, it's more and more um, prominent that we have so many people now dealing with serious mental health issues. Well,
Mhm.
how can you not? A few weeks ago, there was some neighbours down the road, and there was a man, and he was talking to all the cars. There was nobody in the cars, and
Right.
he was he was okay
Mhm.
up until last year.
Mhm.
And I say okay loosely, um,
Mhm.
but suddenly, and it can't be suddenly, it must be that it's
Building
happened
up.
over time and not being treated.
Mhm.
He's talking to things that I can't see, but clearly he can,
Yeah.
and waving and stopping in every car that's in the neighborhood. And you think, well, who's actually looking after these people? Nobody.
Mhm. Mhm. It's we- I, I think more and more with regards to mental health issues,
Mm,
having been through COVID and in isolation, there are things that were buried that people had no choice but to
yes.
face because
Mm,
they had the busyness of work taken away from them. So some coping mechanisms that they were using before to hide behind were stripped from them, and that also during that period, we've got people, and you're right. If we do not go back to the root of what's happening, instead we're putting plasters just to cover up, just patching here and there. We will never get to have mental health issues dealt with. You can't patch over things like childhood trauma or just maybe things that have happened in your life in the past. We can't just patch over them. We have to be able to speak about them. And I think more and more people are coming forward. And I hope they continue to come forward, really to know that you're not a machine, you're a human being, and you're made up mind, body, and soul. And you can't, you can't expect one not to be working and then still carry on functioning with the rest. It is something that we need to speak about. And as before, mental health used to be something, or mental illness used to be something we didn't talk about. It was a taboo
yes.
subject,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
not be a taboo subject. It's something there's a reason, there's a root cause, there's something that's made you mentally ill, and it's not a bad thing to be able to confront that, track back, see where that might have risen from, the cause of that, and then deal with it from that position, rather than just trying to gloss over it and carry on as going. And it's sad to hear the story about your neighbor who was okay, and
Mm,
then one day it's like, what's going on? Who's looking after? How did we get here? Are we promoting psychologically safe spaces? what are work organizations doing to ensure that their workers are getting the support that they need? Is it a safe space enough for them to tell you that they're struggling with things? So we do need to create spaces where people feel safe enough to unpack or to talk about what it is that's going on in their lives. Yes. So it is very important that we do that, because there are so many different things that have battered people. And one thing I've learned on this journey, every single person has a story, be it a good one,
Yeah.
be it a traumatic one. We all have stories that we're carrying inside of us.
It's very, very true. And I'm as you're talking now, Ada,
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself, so we can't right all the wrongs of this world.
No.
It's impossible. What we
Very.
can do, you know, the old adage of, you know, if you save one soul to God, it's as if you've saved the whole world.
Mhm.
And we have to work on that principle, I think,
Yeah.
to try to save each other in a way.
Mhm.
You now speaking hopefully saves somebody. You now talking as well to me saves me in some way, because you
Mhm.
don't know how words can affect somebody,
Yes.
and how they can be, you know, used as weapons, of course, but also as tools for healing. And I wonder if we could come back to ourselves in a
Mhm.
way, each and every one of us. If we were to come back to ourselves, and I think you said at the beginning, to look inwards.
Mhm.
And I think there, because there must have been some force that you relied upon,
Mhm.
looking inwards to yourself, to be able to have that courage to take your children, to flee, to escape to
Mhm.
safety.
Mhm.
So I think maybe also, I think I think so. You know, I believe this 100%, is to give the power back to the people to have control of their life, to
Mhm.
have respect for themselves. Because
Mhm.
unless you respect yourself, unless you are connected in to yourself, mind, body, and soul, um, you haven't got that power. You
Mhm.
need something, don't
Mhm.
you, to give you that strength.
Mhm.
Uh, And
So,
and
yeah.
you know, what do you think about that?
So, as I mentioned, I was a pastor's wife, and
Mm,
I believe in God. Okay, and for
mhm,
me, that was a very having everything around me shaken, my reality just. I'd in my wildest dream would have never told you that I'd end up jobless, homeless, fleeing across borders. Not in this life. But the only thing that kept me going was my faith. I had to really cling on to, because I really had nowhere else to go, and I just had to cling on tightly. And I believe that's what's kept me going. That's so many things have been brought, into my life. Not having money because I lost everything, just not being able to maneuver and have that provided for, being protected, having people come alongside me that really looked after us in such a frightening situation. I'm grateful. I'm grateful, and I. It was something really inside of me said to me, "You have to go, and you must go now." And I'm glad I listened to that, because I truly believe that this story wouldn't be happening now. I don't think I would have had the strength to carry on going. Neither would I have the courage to be able to speak up about my situation. But it's not about me. I had to rise up against shame, rise up against silence, because I had, on the news, someone that I knew about die at the hands of her pastor husband, domestic abuse yet again. So something spurred me on to say, you have to do something. But I truly believe we do have to come back to ourselves. We need to look inward and just reach out, because there are so many organizations, so many things out that can really help us just to rediscover ourselves so that we can fully operate for what we've been created for, to fulfill our mission, whatever it is that we're here to do, and to reach our full potential in doing that. So
Astounding, really. And you are so awe-inspiring, Ada. Really, you are. And there's so much of it here. There's so much to see. It's so deep, it's so wide. And I want to thank you for coming
thank you, Mimi.
today and sharing such powerful wisdom, such really incredible bravery. And what would you say to somebody out there now, if you could say anything to somebody listening out there who's stuck, who's afraid, who doesn't know what to do? What would your message be?
I would say to them, like, I'm touched by that message, that what you've just said now. You are a survivor. You are beautiful. You are strong. You just keep your head up one step. Take it one step at a time. Reach out to organizations if you're stuck in an abusive relationship. Just reach out to organizations or reach out to someone that you can trust, and just really, I think it's a relief the first time you're able to just share what you're going through and shatter that silence in a safe way. You know your what's safe for you, but just to let you know that you truly are beautiful, you are courageous, and you are a survivor.
Oh, how beautiful. It's brought tears to my eyes, actually.
Right.
And, well, I can't really say any more than that.
Thank you.
Other than, I don't want to spoil that precious moment. Other than, where can people get hold of you, Ada? Find out about your work. Um, Tell us all the addresses, so to speak, email addresses. I can't even find the words now. I'm so moved by what you said.
So
Oh, dear.
I'm online. We have a website, and that's againstdomesticabuse.org. So that's www.againstdomesticabuse, one word, .org. So you can check us out there. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Ada Ibezi on LinkedIn, and I'm on Instagram, Ada Ibezi, ADA. So you can reach me there. Yeah, so it's very important that people continue to speak up and break the silence so that we can save lives.
Wow. I'm going to leave the final word now to you, because it's been so powerful and very emotional. And I know that people out there for sure will be healed by a lot of this. And have courage. I would say have courage and listen to this wonderful lady's words and make that first step.
Yes.
Thank you, Ada. Come
Thank
again. I could speak to
you.
you. I don't know. My goodness, so many things I could ask you, but thank you so much. And
Thank
please
you.
do come again.
I will. I will. Thank
Oh,
you, Mimi.
you're very welcome. And thank you. Take
Okay, take
care.
care. You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Ada. Oh, that was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
Absolutely fantastic. And you did. I had to keep myself together. Um, your words are so powerful.
Do you know that question threw me? So I really had to compose myself to give an answer.
Really?
It did. I was like, oh gosh, what would I want to hear in this? So I really did have to compose myself to answer that question.
Oh, well, you did it fantastically and very professionally, I might say.
Well, if you can answer a phone, you can make a phone call after having an argument. I sure can go.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. And oh, we need to hear those words so much. We need to hear those words so much every day of our life. We should print that.
Mm,
You should have that printed as your slogan and you
mm.
should put that on your charity everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Everything else now is an anticlimax, but oh gosh. Um, I will let you know when
Okay.
the episode is live. It goes to the studio now and has all its
Okay.
bits done,
Okay.
so to speak. But if you wouldn't mind sending me a photograph
Okay.
of yourself, as soon as you
Okay.
send that to me, then the episode sort of is finished and we
Okay.
can get it into production. I will
Okay.
then send you the links. It goes on to Apple, Spotify, and all the major download
Okay.
sites.
Thank you.
And I will send that to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so
Um,
much. I'll send you that.
all right. And let's talk after it
Yeah.
goes out.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yes.
thank you for coming on, at this time. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. You're most
Oh,
welcome.
well, I wish you a very nice and very beautiful rest of the evening, Ada, and let's speak
Thank you, Mimi.
soon.
All right. You
God
take
bless.
care.
Take
You too.
care.
God bless you too.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Ada Ibezi, remarkable strength and always showing us that there is always somebody out there to help if needed. Thank you so much for joining me and my guests as always. I would like to wish you beautiful days and always look after yourselves. Until next time, lots of love and take care.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.